Good morning. Thanks so much for being here. We have a small group, so there will be plenty of time for questions. I will try to monitor questions as best as I can, being the only one here, so forgive me if I don't get to your questions right away. So this 1 hour webinar, actually a resume training, we're going to go through a lot of things that will really help you create your own resume. So I'll give you briefly who I am. In case you don't know me, I started in the early 90s as a magazine writer. I was an associate editor and a writer for a magazine, national publication. Then in the late 1990s, I decided to go back to college and get my master's in psychology. And I ended up at a nonprofit as a vocational counselor. So while I was there, like most people that work in nonprofits, I was always looking for information that we could use because we never had enough money. At that time, the fledgling internet was there. And so I was on there looking for career information, all the time. I didn't find a lot. So I decided in the early 2000s, actually 2000, to start a career site for women, which is still up and running now, but it is takes a back seat to my current business. During the time I was running Career Intelligence, I was also working as an adjunct professor, teaching communications and writing at a couple of our local universities here. And then in 2012, excuse me, I started working as a recruiter through someone that my husband knew. I worked contingency for almost 2 years, and then as a retained consultant with one of the companies where I had placed a couple of my clients. So when I was working as a recruiter, of course, having the writing background, I was helping the candidates that I was working with on their resumes so that they could get a job. And certainly when I was working contingency, I would get the placement fees. Being a recruiter is a lot of fun in many ways. However, you are in the middle between the candidates you're trying to help and the employer that you're working for. So I decided in 2014 to excuse me, become a full time, and I've been doing it since then. Today, when we're talking about creating this modern achievement-based resume, I want you to think of this as creating a marketing tool. A lot of people still think of resumes as employment histories. I looked at a lot of resumes when I was a recruiter. I still look at them when I talk to potential clients. And the mistake they make is that, they have these boring resumes that are very task focused. So one of the things that's really important when you're creating a resume is that you need to address station WIIFM, which is what's in it for me. We all listen to that station when we're looking at things and evaluating things. If we're thinking about taking a class or going to a show or whatever, and employers are no different. So they're thinking about that. And you always need to keep that in mind yourself. What's in it for me, as in what's in it for the employers. We're also going to talk about looking for job similarities, and particularly if you are changing careers, this should help you with that. So the Ladders did a study initially back, it was 2012. And the big statistic that came out of that was that recruiters spend 6 seconds deciding if they're going to interview the candidate or not. They redid this study back in 2018, and this time they came up with 7.4 seconds that they used to decide. Now, having been a recruiter myself, I took more than 6 or 8 seconds. But the point is that recruiters are not there spending a lot of time. Now, the Ladders does not have the visual available any longer, but I just want to show you this. This is what they did. They put goggles on recruiters and had them look at resumes, and they monitored where their eyes tracking. And as you can see where the reds are, you know, they look at who the person is, where they are. They're looking at the most current information. They're here looking at the most current or most recent job. On the second page, it shows that they're scrolling down to look at education if that's important. For example, if they're looking for an MBA or someone with a degree in a specific area. So while most people think that a recruiter or an employer picks up a resume and just reads it from top to bottom, that's really not true. You know, they're scanning it first, and we're going to talk more about that later. Now, in 2014, I know this is a while ago, Career Builder did a survey with employers where they asked them how long they evaluate resumes. And a couple of things that came out of this were that employers at that point, and I don't see why it would have been changing, were having more people evaluate resumes. And I got from there was they look at them for about 2 minutes. So, you know, this just gives you an idea that people are not sitting down and spending 5-10 minutes reading a resume. And when you're writing your resume, you also have to think about other readers, you know, HR associates and admins who may be given a job description and a pile of resumes and told, pick us, you know, choose 5 that we should interview. Or they may even be told to go online and look for resumes that match the job description. I was hired myself for a position years ago where the admin went online and looked for resumes, and mine came up and I ended up being interviewed and hired for the job. So you want to make sure that you're writing for the human reader as well. So there's basically 3 types of resume formats. There's the reverse chronological, which is the present to the past, the one that we're all familiar with. This is the choice of recruiters and employers because it shows them the job history. It shows them, you know, how someone has gained momentum through their career. And this is the one they want to see. There is also a functional resume, which you may have heard about. It's often promoted as the ideal to use for people with big gaps in their resumes. This usually focuses on skills, things that someone has done at various positions in their career in the beginning, follow a very brief reverse chronological, which may have the position and the company and maybe not even dates. While it is used by some people, recruiters and employers don't like that. What I use with my clients is kind of a hybrid. It's primarily a reverse chronological resume, and I'll show you an example later, but it's also functional in the sense that, you know, we do bring some career highlights up front, which may not be from the current position. So you want to make sure that your resume is easy to scan everyone. The applicant tracking software system or ATS, recruiters, employers, and other human readers, those admins and HR associates that are looking at these things. I'm going to go into more detail about writing for the ATS system later on in the presentation. So what you want to have on your resume, and I put this on here because I do see resumes that are lacking certain things that are important. Obviously, first and last name, your email address, which if you have something that's like a Yahoo or an AOL, it's really better to upgrade it to something more current like Gmail, because having an AOL address on your resume just kind of makes you look old. Your phone number, of course, and your city, state, and your zip code. Now, when I talk to potential clients today, they often send me resumes and they don't want to put an address on there. And the reason that you need that is for that ATS system. Because if you submit a resume with no location, it may just bounce you out of the system, not really, you may not get the attention or ranking that you're looking for. So you do not need to put your street address, but you do need your city and state and the zip code. And that's also for recruiters. They want to kind of know where you are. Your LinkedIn profile, of course, and you want to personalize your LinkedIn URL, you can find out how to do that online. What you should have is your target position and the industry that you. So you might be a VP of looking for a position as a VP of marketing in the CPG industry, so that you would have that on there. Something I just wanted to present that I use often with my clients is having sort of 3 that they're known for at the top of their resume. On the footer, don't want to include important information in the header or the footer of your Word document. This is put in the footer on the second page, just in case the paper copy gets separated. So people will know that this is your resume. You have the second page, they can still contact you. So I'm always stunned when I see it. People used to put objective statements on their resume. This is what I'm looking for. I want a challenging position where I can work with the team, et cetera, et cetera. Well, employers aren't really interested in this. They're wondering what you're going to do for them. They're not as concerned when they're first reading your resume as what's in it for you. So that's something that is really not used anymore. Having that on your resume also makes you look dated. So the new sort of replacement for it is a summary statement. That's a few lines. This looks long. It's much shorter when you see it on the resume. And the things that it talks about is someone with a track record of growing organic search, engaging online audiences, developing innovative newsletters, et cetera, et cetera. The important thing to remember is the things that you're saying in your summary statement need to be, there needs to be evidence of them in the body of your resume. So if you're talking about growing organic search, then you need to have examples of times that you've grown organic search, either for your company or if you're a consultant for your client. I include a skill summary on all of the resumes that I write for my clients. I recommend it for a couple of reasons. It's great for scanning for any of those readers, human or computer, scanning your resume. And you want to focus on really a core group of skills or strengths. You don't want to have 7 lines of this on your resume talking about every single thing that you're able to. So my recommendation for your professional experience section, what I do on the resumes for my clients, and I will show you an example later, is a couple of lines about the employer. This is used for context. Unless you're working for a major company like Diageo or something, people may not know about it. And when you talk about the employer, the employers that you've worked for, perhaps they've had an international presence with offices all over the world, but no one would know that if you didn't give them some information. Now, you still do want to talk about what you do on a day-to-day basis. It can't just be all of your achievements. So you can have a couple of brief paragraphs that talk about what you do. And I'll talk to you a little bit about that later as well. And then the bullets that you have are for your achievements. So you want to have, 3 to 5, generally speaking, depending on how long you've been with a particular employer. So if you've only been there a couple of years, you may have 3 achievements. If you've been in your position for 6 or 7 years, you probably have more. Hopefully you have more to show. And as far as the details, you should think of your resume as being like a funnel where the most important information, your current position or your most recent position, most of the details are there. The position after that, fewer details. If you're going into details about the third position, shorter still, maybe no achievements, but just a little synopsis. One of the things that I do with my clients is people that do have long careers, but of course, you want to keep your resume brief. 2 pages is my recommendation. But you do want to present that you've been in your career for a long time, or you may have big companies that you've worked for, several jobs back that you want to get on your resume. You can create a selected earlier career section or selected prior career section where you are including your title and the company location, but not the years. And since it's selected, if you worked for Diageo, 15 years ago, you can still get that on your resume, or any company names or specific positions you've held that are really important to the position you're seeking right now. So again, when you're appealing to recruiters and employers, again, you have to address the what's in it for me. What makes you different, and why should a potential employer pick you? Now, people in similar positions do similar things. So if you are managing the team and running reports and, evaluating systems to see how they're working, those are just part of your job and things that would be going in those paragraphs that we talked about. Words that you never want to use on your resume: responsible for, duties included. If you say that you're responsible for running the major marketing campaign, an international marketing campaign, what does that say? It says that, what did you do in that while you were responsible for it? So those are 2 words that you want to just not have on your resume. And you also want to pay attention to, having words repeated too many times. I look at resumes all the time, and someone will have a brief description of their duties followed by, 5 bullets. And 3 of the bullets start with developed and the other 2 start with managed. So, you don't want to have that on your resume. What you do want to use is have engaging resume action words. This is a few here that I came up with. You can go online and find lists of action words. You can look in resume books for a list of action words. And that's what they want to see. You've just decreased something, increased something, transformed the department or the business, generated revenue, partnered with the CEO to do something, recruited top talent. So those are the things you want to use, these action words that really show, motion. So when we're talking about, everybody talks about achievements. You want to see achievements. You want to see impact statements. And people wonder, what does that mean? So a challenge might be something that you face when you got into your position. Maybe it's declining sales or poor staff morale, or, unhappy clients, outdated technology that was sort of stunting productivity. whatever the challenge was, you want to talk about that. Here's what we were facing. And then the action is, what did you do? What did you do personally to address that? If you led the team, put the team together, you talk about that. If you were on the team, you want to talk about the specific things that you did, your role in it. Maybe you took a leadership role, or you provided a particular expertise, negotiated, contract terms if you were getting some new vendors in place. Maybe someone else or other people were doing the vetting and you were of the vendors and you were negotiating the terms. And finally, you want to talk about the result, what happened, and think in terms of money saved, money generated, time saved, etc., and provide the metrics in terms of dollars, percentages, etc. Now, sometimes, it's easier. People say, well, I'm not in sales, so, I'm not generating income. But a lot of the clients that I work with are in operations, and they may redesign different processes within their department. Someone, maybe the controller, or the someone in heading financial services in the company may have redesigned for processing expense reports. So now, instead of taking one person a full week to process the expense reports, it only takes them 2 days. So now there are 3 days that person has to do other things. So sometimes it takes more thought to come up with the metrics, but there's always something there that you can talk about. So when you're writing up these achievements, again, this looks really long. It's not as long on a resume in small type. So you want to, what resume writers call is create front-loaded bullets. And that's where you sort of put the punch up front. This is also something the way newspaper writers write. They write the impact up front, what's happened, and then they go on to say how it's happened. And here, this person is talking right up front, cut overages 70%, from 35% to 10% on average, by negotiating more favorable terms. And then they go on to talk about how they, develop best practices, et cetera, et cetera. And this is part of how they were managed to cut overages 70%. So that's something to really keep in mind. Now, here is the first page of a resume. This is something it's fictionalized, of course. It is from a client that I worked with several years ago. You can see all the information on there. Excuse me. At the top, the title they're seeking, the industry, some words about them, their summary statement. Here are the highlights that they want to talk about, which go with the chart. If you can do a chart, great. If not, no problem. You don't need that. Here are their skills, the information about them, the content for the resume. I'm sorry, the content, the information about the employer for context, a couple of paragraphs about what they do, followed by the achievement statements. Now, it's important, and to separate the sections. You can just do a one plain line across. You don't need to do something like this. But it's important to set them apart, because it makes it easier for people to scan them. I highlight the competencies, often the skills, just to bring them to the reader's attention. And I will talk to you a little bit about some of these adding interest with the bullets. And one thing I do want to mention is you need to make sure when you're putting in your dates that you are putting a tab on the right-hand corner, so they are staying there. When some people just put the cursor there, and then they they tab across the page. And when you do that, when someone else opens your resume, the dates may or may not stay where they're supposed to. So that's what I refer to here as the resume soup. So again, you can see there's a lot of white space. This is very easy to read and easy to scan. I will mention, which I'm going to talk about later, if you do decide to include a chart or any kind of a graphic, you need to make sure that the information is in the body of the resume, because an ATS system does not read this. So, you know, it may look great, you may have some great numbers in there, but ATS does not read that. So you do need to have it in the body of your resume. Now, here is how you can add color. If you want to add lines, you want to apply it to the paragraph. I use red here just for to make it stand out a little bit. You can just use a plain line. You can use something like this. You know, it's really, really not all that hard to do. You can also add interesting bullets. You know, you don't need to have the circles that come up automatically. You can, if you like. You can, if you want to use those, you can just change the font and change the color. You know, if you want to do blue for your color scheme, or you can choose something else from the symbols. Again, you know, it's not that difficult to do. And I do have on my YouTube channel a video that goes through these resume writing format processes. So for the applicant tracking software system, the ATS, you don't want to have any essential data in the headers and footers. I still see resumes all the time where people have their name and contact information in the resume in the header of the Word document. The systems aren't going to see that. Again, it's okay to put it in the footer. It's okay to put your name with page 2 in the header on the second page, because that's not critical information. Also, no essential data in text boxes or graphs, as I mentioned, unless you also have it in the body of your resume. Now, if you want to have a quote from a client or a previous employer, and that's not essential data, you can certainly put that in a text box. But whatever you do, you need to know that it's not going to be read by, if you're uploading it to a job board, or it's not going to be seen by any applicant tracking software system. And virtually every company with more than 50 employees is using a system like that today. Columns, again, you know, it will read them, but it does not always read the information in the order that you want it to be seen. So that's not really a good idea. And then all jobs, you know, you don't want to put all of your jobs on there. What I spoke about before, you can create an earlier career section or selected earlier career section where you can put the those jobs that you had that, you know, maybe are important to your current job search, but you know, there's no need to have detail about them. Okay, so finding job similarities. One of the things that people think about when they're looking at jobs is, you know, are they qualified? Are they not qualified? They're looking for things like keywords. And so there's 2 sites that I recommend you to use, the ONET Online, which is done by the US Department of Labor, and the Occupational Outlook Handbook, which is done by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And, you know, the thing about these websites is that, you know, they are free for you to use. So here I just want to show you, this is the Occupational Outlook Handbook. And you can find so much information up here. Here are a bunch of occupation groups. If you go into something like business and financial, you know, these are the different different jobs that they have information on. And if you just look at the first one here, they have, pay and the education that's needed, that type of information on what they do, the job outlook. So if you're looking for, here's the information on what they do. And so here you can also find some keywords that you might want to use, although, job descriptions are also a great place to find keywords. So, this is great information that you can use for free. So free is always good. All right, so here's an example of something that I did. If someone is changing positions, here's someone that's changing, technically they're changing careers, but, they're not going from being an accountant to a wedding planner. The positions do have a lot of things in common, although you may not notice it as you first read it, reporting the news, informing the public, and, public image, etc. So at first glance, you think, okay, well, what are the things that they have in common? So they have many similarities, and a reporter is interviewing sources to gather information. Here someone is, the PR person is interviewing clients, developing these relationships with different types of people, writing things. While there is a difference between writing articles and blogs and writing a press release, if you have experience and you have those writing skills, it's something you can build on. Also, they both do research and analyze and interpret information. I will tell you, I have changed careers a few times in my life, and when I was going to move into that nonprofit area, and I had my magazine writer experience. And when I was interviewing, I was, finishing up a master's degree, so I did have that going for me. But when I was interviewing, one of the parts of my job was to write monthly reports on how the clients we were working with were doing, and, various other things. So I really stressed to them, my writing ability and how that would really help me in the position that I was applying for. So here, again, here's even, more detail that you can use for the job interview, functioning in a fast-paced environment. Some people love that, some people do not. One of the things I really noticed when I moved from publishing to nonprofit was publishing was always a very, very fast pace. We were always working on, the magazine for, 2 months in the future, and nonprofit was much slower pace. So again, you can see here the degrees are similar. So those are things that you can use when you're putting together your resume. So again, the primary thing when you're talking about creating this modern resume that will generate, results for you, the board of job duties that runs, 4 pages is just not going to be as compelling as 2 pages that are packed with value and really show employers, recruiters, what you can do. So think of it always as a marketing tool that's easy to scan. Think about addressing what's in it for me. I tell the clients that I work with, when you're giving me the information, think about, so what? I did this, so what? What was the impact? And then finding similarities between your current job and your target position. Now, May is, information, you decide to want to work with a professional, obviously I'm help you. I will tell you, I'm developing a do-it-yourself resume package right now that will have some templates and some directions and information. And if you're interested in finding out when that's ready to for people to have, you can email me, email at info. We have a lot of information on social media. Here are all of the sites. Now, are there questions that anyone has as we wind this down? I know we have a small group, but no questions? Okay, well, if there are no questions, I will wrap this up. I do want to mention that there is a resume attached, I'm sorry, a video attached to the end of this, and it's how to use LinkedIn settings in your job search. So it's something where I go through and I show you different areas of LinkedIn that you can use in your job search. So thanks so much for being here. And if there are no questions, oh, you're very welcome. Have a great day.